Hello and welcome to Two Marines in Kyiv. Once again, I'm sitting here with Andy Milburn, former MARSOC commander of Combined Joint Task Force who fought against ISIS, and currently the CEO of the Mozart Group, doing great things out here in Ukraine.
And I wanted to introduce my friend and business partner, divided by literally a lethal gulf, because Andy is founder, CEO of the Ukraine Freedom Fund, and does tremendous work for the Ukrainian people and their defense of their homeland against the Russian Federation. And for me, for the Mozart Group, we're combined, we're united by common intent. The only division within us is purely legal. It's the means by which we pursue that intent, because in Mozart Group, we do train people to defend their homeland, and we provide things that could potentially kill people, actually are intended to do so. And so we are not, therefore, within the auspices of what's it called, a 501c or a
501c3 is a tax-deductible U.S. charity at www.theuff.org. You can pause the podcast now and go donate if you want, or you can wait till the end of the podcast.
But either way, please donate, because it would really suck if we ran out of funding. The Mozart Group has perhaps not as deep pockets as Ukraine Freedom Fund, and we certainly need the money, as we will explain.
But you had an interesting week this weekend. A couple of things happened. You went down to the southeast, didn't you?
Yeah. Why didn't you pronounce the name of the place? Because I keep butchering it, and our Ukrainian friends...
It's so funny to hear you say the name of the city.
Ukrainian friends keep laughing at me, and it's really embarrassing.
It's Zaporizhzhia for those of us who...
Yeah. Okay, Zaporizhzhia. Yeah, so we went down to a location actually about 45 minutes southeast of Zaporizhzhia. It's in what the Ukrainians call the security zone, which essentially means the area as you approach the front lines. Even correspondents, certainly foreign nationals, are normally not allowed in the security zone. And, for good reason, because the last thing the Ukrainians want is the liability of having Westerners who had not signed a contract with the Ukrainian military being killed or wounded. Well, we in the Mozart Group have not signed such a contract. We are an American entity. We are not mercenaries, but nevertheless, because we are in close support of our Ukrainian partners, in this case, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, specifically an Azov battalion, we were allowed to go and stay with them. Andy, do you want me to go and just set the scene real quick, or am I too much?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So actually, it's really fascinating. They put us up, I guess in their company CP, and I can't say too much about it because I don't want it to be targeted. But these guys were supremely gracious, but they have their work cut out, as you're probably tracking. The Ukrainian military, specifically the Azov Brigade and the Marines, have taken very heavy casualties in Mariupol. And, sadly, it looks likely as though it's going to be a fight to the death there if indeed the city does fall. In any case, it's no secret that the defenders, who are extraordinarily tenacious and brave, are running low on pretty much everything. So the Ukrainian Special Operations Command is forming battalions intended to replace those battalions that they may well end up losing. And so the guys we were with, all of whom super friendly, super intelligent, but they are coming out of civilian world, just a few weeks ago. And they wanted us to come in and help train them, prepare them for combat in a very short time limit, which I can't define for security reasons, obviously OPSEC reasons, but startlingly short. The one thing they have going for them, tremendous cohesion, tremendously high morale. They believe in their cause and they believe in each other. And, I'll just give you a couple of vignettes. I mean, we're staying in their CP, and they've got a few older hands around whom this battalion is forming. They're cadre combat veterans, and they came back from an all-night patrol just as we were getting up. And they insisted that we eat breakfast before them, first in line, all unfailingly courteous. They wanted us to come out and watch them train like the new recruits. And it is very poignant to think, watching these guys, that they're going to be in intense combat in a short time. And the task that we have is to prepare them to do that, both from a training perspective and an equipping perspective. And I will pause there. Back to you, Andy.
But you bring up the morale. And actually today I was in the meeting with some of the guys you have training, and the Ukrainians are going to train next week. And I just mean, they're all young and gentlemen. They're all, I'm not even sure what rank they were, if they even gave ranks. They're so new to what they're doing. And it's just the level of professionalism and politeness is a word, but it was not in a good way. Not that there's a bad politeness, but it's a very interesting dynamic, and they're all about to go out to the front, and like it or not, there are a lot of people dying out there.
So scrupulous courtesy, in the face of absolute savagery, and we've talked about that before, and in the face of a loss of a lot of their comrades. And it's, again, I'm not breaking OPSEC by saying the Ukrainians are sustaining high losses, and yet they're fighting with a happy heart.
But I think they do, and I don't think Americans understand this. A few do, but I don't think most do. That really is, it's a civilizational conflict, and between Istanbul and Vienna has always kind of been this north, south, east, west tension. And now it's stuck here in Ukraine, which has always been overrun for the last several thousand years. I've said it before, but I think it's fascinating that here the Ukrainians have said enough. We're not going to be overrun. And I would predict that they will actually not give up much more land and will start to go on the offensive. They're asking for more weapons, and hopefully the West will give them the tanks and the artillery that they need on time to do stuff, before the weather gets any worse.
Yeah, but, on that, and this isn't a shameless plug for either of our organizations, but the one thing that both Ukraine Freedom Fund and the Mozart Group do is that we take whatever the donation it is, whether it's equipment or dollar, and we transfer it, we turn it into capability on the front line. And honestly, not through any ill intent, but there's actually not every organization can say that, but we do. We're determined to.
Well, you made quite a stir this week with your, besides being the CNN's latest star with your multiple interviews, but and I don't think you got that much traction in the States or people picked up on it, but here you created quite a scandal with your comments about logistics. And even though the comments were fairly mundane, I just got to have a meeting with the head of the parliamentary committee who's now investigating your comments, who wants to meet you.
Hopefully I'll get out of that meeting without my hands behind my back.
Well, actually, I invited him. I invited him to join us in the podcast today, but unfortunately had a conflict. But he was interested, and
He's rounding up the posse.
Yeah, I know.
I saw the cordon around the building.
No, but it is, even Blinken, some of the journalists at BBC I saw picked up on the logistics issues.
I'm really glad you said that, Andy, because I have been, the feedback, some of it is very negative. I've been told of feeding Russian propaganda. Some knucklehead today said you're making Russian propaganda and showed a clip of me being shown on Russian TV. And the point is, I'm very clear in saying this is not Ukrainian corruption. The results of this, and there are no bad actors involved in what is going wrong. I'm adamant about that. It's everyone with the best intentions. But the point is that, for the American side, European Command, again, trying to do the right thing, but because of policy, because they can't reach across that border to provide oversight of the logistics chain, of course it's going to break down. And, and then you've got territorial defense force commanders who want to outfit their guys, right? Of course they do. They're not stealing from others. They assume that the United States is the font of all largesse, and they think, listen, I want to get my guys outfitted, and I assume everyone else is too. And then you just get the lack of kind of the pull or push that we're familiar with in the U.S. logistics chain, because you're dealing with a country at war that's tapped out, and so lacks the kind of the focus and resources to get stuff onto the front line. And that is what we in the Mozart Group, and we're not the only organization trying to do that, but we are certainly pushing that. Anyway, back to my comments. I did suggest solutions, and the vilification that I've received shocks me a little bit until I pull the string and find out that it's NGOs who are worried about donors with big pockets being frightened away because of my comments. And, my comments back to them are, it doesn't matter how deep their pockets are, because the shit that they are buying is not getting the places where they go.
Well, I think the biggest part of the problem is it's an obsolete supply system.
Yeah.
That is Soviet and it's paper-based, and so they can't track anything.
And the U.S. can't help them. They even FSRs, what does FSR stand for again? Field Service Representative from major manufacturers are not allowed to come into country to expedite or enable the process to happen.
Yeah, I think there are things that you can do to improve the transparency. It's difficult to do in time of war. And there's steps I understand are going to be taken, but it's, I've heard a lot of the Ukrainians say just what you said about it being you're playing in, you're a Russian stooge, and but the key part of being a democracy is openness and transparency.
What do you want us to do?
Problem unless you admit there's a problem.
What do you want us to do? Like pretend it isn't happening?
Yeah, I mean,
or lie?
Everyone knows it's happening.
Yeah.
And I got a picture today of 200 Starlink units supposedly in a warehouse held by the Lviv City Council. Yeah. That they've safeguarded just in case they need more.
In case they need to know where they are in the world.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I understand why they want them in case something happens, but hey, what about, the 200 units that don't have Starlinks?
Yeah, and meanwhile, the unit that we visited up on, I'm pretending we weren't on the front line, but just immediately behind the front line. They're going to go to the front line soon. They've got one trauma kit per 50 guys. Talking about training, they've got one medic per 40 guys. And you think about how that breaks down to U.S. unit going to war and a Marine Special Operations unit, you've got 2 medics per 14 guys. So the ratios aren't right, the training isn't right, the equipment isn't right. They're using like these bright yellow kids walkie-talkies instead of secure radios. They don't have drones, they don't have mortars. I mean, I don't want to overplay this. That's why we're here. I just want to say, no, there's certainly no element of exaggeration. They are fighting on sheer courage alone. And that's great, but it means they're going to incur casualties that they don't need to incur. And it is, I don't mean to be Chicken Little, but the situation now as U.S. national interest there's kind of Ukraine fatigue, right? And American public's looking for other things. But it's at a very concerning time because the Russians are making progress. They've learned lessons. They've got better quality troops, no less savage, but better quality as far as training and morale. And they are making progress in the south and east. You can't track it on live maps. So I know people will listen to this and go, well, that's not what I'm saying. But commanders on the ground, Ukrainian commanders, very honest about it. And estimates vary between, parts of the front, it's a few kilometers. Other parts, it's 10 kilometers a day. That's a significant advance. I don't think anyone doubts that the Ukrainians will stop them and eventually push them back, but they're going to have their work cut out for them. And that's why we do not want to see donor fatigue at this time. All right. I mean, it's only money. I mean, if every one of my friends on LinkedIn gave, $50, that would be a significant contribution. And I think we worked it out. That would outfit and train an entire special operations battalion. $50 is less than what you spend for yourself on a meal in DC. So I suppose it all comes down to what is really important to you. And by the way, if you're listening to this, and I'm happy to talk to corporate sponsors or potential corporate sponsors about what is happening here and, observations, what they're worth of the war and feedback of contributions, where they are going to go. And then I'll turn over to you for a moment, but I would like to talk about some of the things that you and I have branched out into in the Mozart group.
Well, I think it's Ukraine suffer a lot of liabilities, like you pointed out. The upside being that they're fighting Russians, and the Russians bring not only their own liabilities, but a very corrupt culture with no real incentive in being here. And I'm certain that the way the French and the Italians stood out as sort of the joke armies of the early 20th century, the Russians will stand out as the joke army of the early 21st century. So the way they did in 1905, and they went and attacked Japan and got their ass handed to them the way they are now. And it's, I think it'll be really interesting to see how Russia unfolds after they lose here in due course, and hopefully the stalemate doesn't freeze, and that the Ukrainians are able to eradicate them from their territory. But I think the ongoing implications to long-term Russian policy with the rest of the world are going to be enormous, and I think it's really been a shift. I actually got a note from a friend in Moldova where I read 43% of the people think that the war was started by NATO because there's a lot of pro-Russian propaganda down there from Transnistria. And they're under the understanding the biggest beneficiaries of this war are Turkey and the United States. And I frankly don't disagree with that. Yeah. But it's not like...
It's inadvertent. It's not...
Yeah, it's not like we didn't... I'd like to think we were so clever we could instigate, prod us into doing really stupid things.
Effing only. We were that smart. Yeah.
But it is watching Moscow unfold. Someone was there a couple of weeks ago and said that it was not as bad as people would have thought due to sanctions.
But, you mean Moscow?
Yeah.
Yeah. I canceled my planned summer vacation there.
I think
probably wise. Hearing on the television there.
Yeah, I think your visa might not go very far these days.
So, and what I'd like to do is talk about just very quickly some of the things that we've branched out into. We've got some super bright guys here. By the way, I do want to throw this out to listeners. If you really, I know this sounds very cliche, but if you really want to make a difference in the world, do consider volunteering, donating or volunteering for the Mozart Group. We are not going to squander your life or put you in unnecessary danger. Anything that we do here is, of course, risky, but we take deliberate risks. We're not trigger pullers on the line. But the things we are doing, I'll give you just a quick run through, right? We're actually the lead among organizations, non-Ukrainian organizations, for the demining effort. And that's getting underway next week, bringing a bunch of EOD techs headed by a South African company who very, very kindly have volunteered their services. And we're falling underneath the Ministry of Defense's humanitarian demining, I guess you call it division or commission, but they are the ones who are responsible within the Ukraine for all demining. So that is significant.
That's going to be critical, and I've talked to a couple of guys at European Command in the U.S. about this, because when we went up to European and Bucha, even the Ukrainian soldiers were jumping up and down on the tanks that had been blown up.
Kicking metal around.
And, the unexploded ordnance is going to take a lot of casualties, and they need to teach people not to kick, random metals in places in battlefields. But then the mines, once the spring rains go, after 3 or 4 months, the mines will, at least visible from the surface now, will subsume into the dirt. And so it's critical that they start cleaning up now. I honestly don't know that UCOM's, or anyone else is really focused on that.
The scale of the task is incredible. I did call someone at UCOM to ask the question and was told, Andy, that's not a priority right now, which is sad because the Ukrainians think it's priority. There's 126,000 square kilometers that they call contaminated, which means, in their parlance, it means that it's hazardous to the civilian population that's already moving back in. 126,000 square kilometers. All right, you think that almost every square meter of that area has to be searched. I mean, it does. Cleared. Cluster. The Russians have been wanton and just dropping cluster munitions everywhere. That's part of their SOP. They left booby traps aplenty. I mean, it's just the UXO is stacked up. So that's an extraordinary task. Now, as far as training and equipping, I already talked about equipping, shaking things loose from various supply nodes, logistics nodes, and expediting them to the units that need it most. And the training piece, we're still going to have a training node here in Kyiv focused on units that rotate to the front line. And Andy's been working hard on that with some of our Ukrainian partners. But we're also going to set up, we're already setting up a node. I'm going to butcher the name again. Southeast of Zaporizhzhia. Whatever. Beyond Dnipro, way beyond Dnipro anyway. And then also on the Eastern Front, probably a vicinity of Kyiv. And that's going to tie in. I'm talking about the Eastern Front now. We went to speak to the extraordinary woman who runs the Hospitalia Battalion, right? And that's not like Hospitality Battalion, Hospitala Battalion. Yana, do you remember her last name?
Zinkevich.
Yeah, extraordinary. Anyway, so she has understandably been quite cynical about offers of Western help, because her people are very highly trained, her men and women, and the way that their job is this: they evacuate soldiers from the front line, right, even down to like the casualty collection points below company level. So for us, we went to offer our services to help assist them by providing supplies, but also not paramedics, but combat medics to actually man the evacuation teams. And so we have rogered up, as you might say, to augmenting 2 of her evacuation teams. It's a start. It's not a lot, but by putting 3 combat medics in each one of those vehicles. Notice I didn't say ambulance, because those vehicles, by necessity, have a 12.7 machine gun mounted on top. So the other 2 members of that team are a driver and a gunner, one of which would be able to speak English. I was going to say rather American, but actually our combat medics are going to be a mix of nationalities. And then in addition to that, we've had volunteers from the States who've worked in trauma in Afghanistan or Iraq or just within the United States. And so we're going to augment, this isn't the right term, I know, but surgical trauma teams with doctors, physician assistants, medics, nurses in a hospital in Kyiv. And, the challenge of that is we need people for a month who are going to roger up for a month at least, because there's an element of on-the-job training. And then with a pool of medics and doctors, we're going to just rotate. And tied to that will be a flow of logistic supplies raised almost exclusively from donations that we funnel into that one effort. Now, if we have the capacity, we will expand that effort, but we want to start small. We want to do well starting small, rather dissipate our efforts and be all over the place and build from there. We're very proud to be part of this effort, but it's obviously a tremendous amount of responsibility. the training node. We're going to set up training logistics node also to the vicinity of Kyiv. And that we expect to do the PDSS or site survey for that sometime in the next week. In addition to that, we have evacuation teams standing by, not for wounded soldiers, but for civilians, high-risk civilians in areas that are threatened by the Russians, that we will go in and plan, just like a military operation, to extract them. Oh, combat advising, right? Very quickly. So those of you who were familiar with the ETTs and the MTTs that we sent to Iraq and Afghanistan, remember that in the early days, those guys, they all the way through, they fulfilled a role, not only training, but also mentoring, advising units in combat, from, like the planning part, integration of combined arms, integration of intelligence, logistics, we're talking at battalion, company level, all the way down to how you run casualty evacuation. How do you run a tactical operations center at the company battalion level? What are the drills for troops in contact, QRF, link up, and again, casualty evacuation. So the combat advisory part here is going to be huge. I'm sorry, Andy, back to you.
No. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think part of what we want to do is from the combat advisory is also getting a logistical advisory, and we're looking.
Yeah, good point.
We're now trying to find some good senior veteran logisticians who can come in and help sort out and assist in the way modern logistics. One of the issues, like with the artillery systems, I know EUCOM is getting old Soviet systems from Slovakia or Czech, whatever, and bringing them in because they conform to what Ukrainian standards are right now. The Ukrainians want more modern American systems, but those systems also rely on different logistics systems, which are more difficult. So it's not just bringing in the new artillery piece, it's bringing in logistics chain and the just-in-time supply that goes with it. And so it's one of the issues. They had a bottleneck at the border because they were bringing in tanks and the Poles were offloading, putting the tanks at the border, but the Ukrainians didn't have the low boys that you need to do it. You're not going to drive a tank across country. You put it on a truck that carries the tank. And Ukraine doesn't have enough of that. So the guys at EUCOM and Pentagon were working on not just giving tanks, but giving the low boys to get the tanks to the front. You don't want the largest armored army in the world sitting on the western border of Ukraine. Actually, this week I thought I heard that the Ukraine now has more tanks than Russia.
Yeah, that could well be. It's very interesting. Of course, they make their own tanks.
But they've captured a lot, and then the West is giving a lot.
Yeah. And the Ukrainians are super smart about this. I remember I think we talked about this last week, but on motion about Marine Corps getting rid of its tanks. The Ukrainians actually saying, the tank's kind of obsolete unless you can make an unmanned tank. That would be useful. But the tank itself is obsolete because it's outranged by so many things now. Its main gun is outranged. You've got to factor in and build in so many things to make a tank be able to hold human beings and provide protection for human beings, but you make it more cumbersome, heavy, and expensive by doing that. When we talk about training and everything, it's interesting. We learn as much from the Ukrainians as they learn from us. So it's I hate to say this, synergistic. It is synergistic relationship, and we're very proud to be part of it. And, Andy, I know we're getting to the end here. Look, I know I keep soliciting for funds. My biggest fear is that we'll run out of money and let people down, and we don't have the same pension as, say...
Your website is www.themozartgroup.com.
Yeah, please go to that. It gives you a button to donate. And, I'll just give you an example, right? We beg and borrow a lot of the stuff we're getting. Right now, we've got 3 guys training Ukrainian SOF in drone called The Ghost, made by a company called Anduril. I want to do a shout out for Anduril because they've been tremendously generous. They're 2 drones valued about $500,000, $20,000 worth of training, all donated to us. We flew our trainers to California, and they went through the training on the drone, and they kind of hand-carried these drones. I'm exaggerating, not hand-carried, but they traveled with the drones into country and now training the Ukrainian SOF. So my point is, again, we give good bang for the buck. We find a way to get equipment for free or at least very low price. And even something as prosaic and practical as vehicles, we need rugged vehicles. I mean, Nissan Pathfinders, Toyota Hilux. And because of Andy's connections in country, we're able to buy these things at cost. About 20,000?
No, we're buying used on the theory that they're going to be obsolete in about 2 months. But no, we're paying about 10, 12 grand a used SUV.
Yeah,
after we check them out and have the mechanics look them over. But so far we've supplied a lot of different units.
And which is, you contrast that. I know, okay, this isn't me pointing fingers, but there's a massive NGO hospital that begins with Samaritans and ends with Purse. because of their own regulations, they do great work, by the way, globally, but because of their own regulations, they can't leave Lviv. And they've got a fleet of some, I haven't seen them, I'm told 60 vehicles, brand new, sitting down there. They can't, or they say they can't help us, allow us to use them, even if it's for, just evacuation of casualties, because the Mozart Group is, we do training, we do bad things like train people to defend their families and homes, which is against Samaritan's Purse's policies. But listen, I'm just giving you a contrast to the fact we're a human organization in the sense that we focus on getting the best bang for the buck that we're getting. We have to. And a lot of our funds go to just life support. Our guys don't get paid much at all. In fact, they don't. They just get paid enough to survive on. We give them lodging and we pay for their airfare. That's it. We're not sourcing, we're not creating this big contractor industry here of Blackwater type people who are earning, $750 a day. That's not us. Guys who come out, they want to do the right thing. They're risking their lives to do it. And we just want to be able to continue doing it. So absolutely. www.themozartgroup.com. Andy, back to you.
Well, I think we're out of time, Andy, but thanks everyone for listening in today. Andy's just mentioned his site. Ours is www.theuff.org. Please donate generously. We're here trying to help Ukraine defeat something that is truly evil. We have some good guests lined up for next week, and we'll look forward to talking to you then.
I feel like we should end with that. Have you been, in the restaurants here when they close them, all the customers start chanting "fuck Putin," but in Ukrainian? I feel like we should end on that note. But anyway, All right. Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks.